Hello, I'm Mighty. I am an outfit leader on the Soltech server. I've been playing in Outfit Wars, and I've also been trying to document them over the last couple of weeks, mostly due to a long and convoluted series of decisions that led me to this particular point in my life. Let's just try and get through it together, team. This week, I'm going to be covering the results from round 3, as well as doing predictions for round 4, which is this weekend, or, you know, in a couple of hours, depending on how long it takes me to get this up. I generally aim to avoid discussing design elements of Outfit Wars, as I think that that's a different topic that I can go on for hours in a different video. So this week, we're just going to try and focus on the matches as best we can. So we'll start with week 3 and the matches that were. Let's bring that bad boy up there. So week 3, we had match 1 was a Stim, Thunder Cougar Falconbirds, and Catcher. Catcher was the TR outfit, and they were a little bit outclassed by the other two teams. Stim played extremely well. They had a really interesting strategy with construction as well, and they just pushed very, very hard. They actually ended up splitting the map so that the VS and the TR had to fight Stim, and they coped with it extremely well, and that gave them a lead that was more or less insurmountable after they survived the double team. But they held on extremely well. They played very well, and they deserved the win. Match 2 we have. So match 2 is a little bit of a contentious one. RWCN, BMLX, and AMXE were the outfits that played. Now, AMXE's unfortunately been getting double teamed a lot recently, and that happened in this match. Basically, the TR and the NC more or less focused the VS very, very hard. It was the point where they were building construction bases outside the VS natural relics. They did manage to hold those 2 relics against basically 2 platoons of enemies on either front. And then it sort of looked like once they were mathematically eliminated, the NC and the TR started to fight each other. However, in the week that's come out, it was judged that the TR and the NC outfits were engaging in match fixing and the deliberate double teaming, which they recently addressed with the unspoken code of conduct. And so as a result, those 2 outfits have been, RWCN and BMLX, have been disqualified for next week, which we will go into a little bit later. So overall, the match itself, AMXE held on really hard. They managed to push out occasionally against it. Like it definitely took the 2 teams. AMXE is definitely a very strong team, and so hopefully they get their win that they deserve in the coming weeks. We move on to match 3 for week 3 was RVNX, Last Ravens, Black Sun Empire on the VS, and NCJP, the New Conglomerate Japan Community. Now, this match had Ravens bringing a full team, and Black Sun Empire and NCJP bought roughly about 1 to 2 squads each. So Ravens basically just kind of spread themselves out along the match. They tried to make sure that they didn't overpop any one fight, and they just fought on 2 even fronts until they won. You know, it seems like a pretty polite scrap all round. Lots of the guys were throwing GGs in the chat and things like that. So looks like it was a decent match, decent fun match for the people involved, but unfortunately it wasn't a full match in the spirit of the competition. But that's okay. We will get on to what that means for Ravens very shortly. Match 4. So match 4 was match 4 was as any match with Doge involved, was a very interesting match. Now the HHVS team, sorry, the match was Doge 1908 or SE Boy 25. 1908 is their tag, or the VS branch of the HH community, which is a massive Chinese community. Now, Doge basically played real hard with a very small bunch of players. They were the first to get to their natural relics, and they more or less just pushed out and out and out as hard as they could. What I suspect happened is the TR and NC teams looked at the NC population, were like, whatever, and more or less ignored them. So most of the fight was along the TRNC, against the TRVS natural relics, which was B and C. So Doge actually just ended up collecting the rest of the relics and won with like 22% population. I didn't get a chance to check the actual numbers of players that were online, but Doge were very heavily outnumbered and managed to come out ahead. So good on them, and managing to get through. So we have match 5. We'll move on to match 5. Was not really much. THOC and ATJT are like ghost entries, more or less. So it was basically a free win for Overthreat. They didn't have very much competition, if anybody turned up on the other teams. There's not much to say, unfortunately. It's just how it is. So that's match 5. Match 6 was WTFG, HHTR, and FHRE. Now this match, I thought this match would be a total snooze fest, but it actually had a pretty decent turnout. So WTF bought a small group of people. FHRE bought like a medium-ish sort of thing. FHRE is the tag for Celestial Being. And they are traditionally on live. They're a bit of an air outfit. They usually a lot of ESFs. They're very good at air to ground, and that plays into this match. So despite being quite heavily outnumbered, FHRE were fighting against the TR, and HH on TR had the largest attendance. I don't know if it was a full 48 though. I didn't get a chance to check. So basically, because the FHRE guys had experience in the air and the TR made very little attempt to clear the air, they basically just managed to leverage the force multipliers extremely well. And so the FHRE guys took off a pretty decent win against the HH group ahead. So the match actually had quite a lot of pretty interesting stuff going on despite the population differences. There was a really interesting, I say interesting, there was the TR tried HH has got this strategy where they get everybody into maxes and then use a steel rain to try to move the maxes somewhere really quick. They did it on a map, and they did do it during this map. They dropped on relic D. Unfortunately, all of the FHRE players were up in the balconies and there were ESFs overhead, so that max crash didn't go so great. It was, you know, it was a thing. They also had a couple of bastions rolling around on the side of the TR. Sorry, not bastions. The other bastion, Colossus. They had a couple of Colossuses rolling around, and but they didn't really support them. It was like a Colossus. There weren't any support Sunderers with it or anything like that. They just had Prowlers and this Colossus, and then they all just got bombed by ESFs. It was it. So the TR did have a lot of big pushes to D and things like that, but the one time they managed a very, very good push, they got to the point and FHRE had dropped behind them and backcapped them. So they got pretty much outplayed every step of the way on the TR side there. So the VS actually won that one, even with a smaller amount of population, and just really good play with the ESFs. So I was actually glad that match worked out that way. There's interesting things to watch. All right, we move on to next week's matches. So next week's matches, we've got match 1, which is Stim versus TCFB versus RWCN. So this match is actually going to be a 1v1 because RWCN have been disqualified. So Stim and TCFB are likely to just sit there and fight each other for a little bit. Stim, I think, is the stronger outfit, and TCFB's quite often had some scheduling issues. So they sometimes are short a couple of players. So I think this one's pretty, I think it's going to go pretty well for Stim on this one. But fortunately, both outfits they're used to fighting each other by now. This is the 4th round, and this is the 3rd time each of these outfits have fought each other. So I think Stim and TCFB are probably like best frenemies by now. So we move on to match 2. Match 2 is RVNX, Last Ravens versus Doge versus Black Sun Empire. Now, like with any match featuring Doge, it might be interesting to watch to see what happens, because it can be a bit of a clown fest. I expect Last Ravens should have a pretty reliable win on this one, as they're the only group on that match that brings a full team. That being said, Doge have very consistently overperformed with small numbers, so I think it might be interesting to watch. And Ravens have fought Black Sun Empire before as well last week, and Black Sun generally bring about 2 squads-ish, so it'll be interesting to see how that one rolls out, but I pretty much expect that the Ravens should be able to get a win there based on numbers. But, you know, Doge's got the power of friendship, so who knows what'll happen at this point. Okay, match 3. Match 3 is AMXE versus Catcher versus BMLX. So this is another match that features a disqualification from BMLX. So this match looks like it'll just be a 1 versus 1. AMXE versus Catcher. Catcher were in the last week, they were in the top rank on TR, and they'd only gotten there because they'd only fought against no-shows in the qualifiers. So they got to the top and quickly learned what it takes to stay at the top. So now they're just on their way back down the ladder a little bit, and they're meeting AMXE, who are probably going to keep kicking them down. So that match should basically just be a 1v1 with AMXE versus Catcher. And that's it. Match 4 is Overthreat versus Celestial Being, FHRE, versus the New Conglomerate Japan Community. Now, Overthreat, interestingly enough, were always one of the favorite outfits on TR, and they got really unlucky in their first match and came last, during the qualifiers, which actually put them way down at the bottom of the ladder. So they've actually haven't really had a match that's a test for them in the last couple of weeks as a result of that. But this match might have a little bit of that. I still think that Overthreat will win this pretty comfortably. FHRE have usually been bringing about a squad or so, but Overthreat are a lot more comfortable controlling the airspace than HH was last week against FHRE. And NCJP is also a partial team, so they might bring a whole group, they might not. They've been really unreliable. So I'm pretty sure that Overthreat's got this in the bag, and other than that, that's kind of it. And then we move to match 5, last one this week. Oh, we're running out of matches now because it's getting closer to the end. Is HHVS versus SCBoy25 versus THOC. So, based primarily on population numbers, I would expect HH to win this just because when they do turn up, they can generally bring a whole team. They are a massive, massive community. After that, I expect that SCBoy25 will come through, and THOC I expect to be last, as they're basically a ghost entry. But HH has generally been underperforming with the numbers. So on live, they're a big Zerg fit, and their logistical play is pretty good. But their individual clicking things, and when the populations are even, they do tend to fall apart a little bit. So I'll be interested to see how this one goes. I strongly suspect that HHVS has got the best chance to win it, but SCBoy25 picked up a couple of players in the last week, in the last fortnight. So if they come out to play, they come out to play, and if they don't, they don't. Who knows? This match is just kind of a, just what it is. Basically just unreliable teams. So, unfortunately, due to the disqualifications, this means that there are no matches this week that have got full teams. It's basically just going to be a couple of 1v1s and a couple of partial teams versus full teams. So match 1 and 3 are the closest ones to having 2 full equal 1v1s. But the teams involved in those matches have a bit of a skill difference between them. So I pretty much don't expect any surprises in those matches. All right, we move on to ladder possibilities for the next couple of weeks. So for the VS, I predict that TCFB will probably come second in their match against Stim, and AMXE will come first, which will force a tiebreaker when they both get 8 victory points. HH has a possibility of getting a win in their match, depending on if they turn up, which brings them up to 7 points. And even if Black Sun Empire comes second, it will move HH into third place, underneath TCFB and AMEX. But there's a wrinkle. HH and FHRE are both kind of on the cusp of getting eliminated. both of them, to stay competitive, need to win to earn enough points to stay in. HH has been a bit of a low performer, and FHRE is playing against Overthreat, which is one of the stronger TR teams. So I think that one of those two teams are likely to get eliminated this week, and of the two of them, it might more so be it might more so be Celestial Being, just because they're facing stronger opposition. However, if we want to go fun thought experiments, if FHRE and HH win, and Black Sun, even if Black Sun comes second, then Black Sun faces elimination with only 6 points. So who knows? But that's a big if thought exercise. So we move over to the TR ladder. Now, with the disqualification of RWCN, that means that the TR is down to 3 full teams: Ravens, Catcher, and Overthreat. Next week, Ravens is going to move up to the top rank. I think that's pretty much mathematically guaranteed. And Catcher will probably end up 3rd. They're in a match with a disqualified opponent, and Overthreat have got more or less a free win. So Overthreat is likely going to get moved up to 2nd. Catcher will come 3rd. RWCN will be eliminated, which will leave SC Boy 25 on the bottom of the ladder for next week. The NC side, this one's nice and easy, actually. So because BMLX has been eliminated, there is one full team on the entire NC roster, and that's Stimpack. Doge will be in 2nd place, just from the maths. I think that Stim will stay on top. And the remaining NC teams are pretty much half teams or non-teams, and they're playing against opponents that do tend to turn up. So I think on the NC ladder, it's almost mathematically guaranteed at this point that it's going to be Stim on top, Doge on the 2nd, and NCJP will be the 3rd one in the final week. I expect that Thok will be eliminated the week after next, and obviously BMLX will be knocked out this week because they had their scores zeroed and got disqualified. So that's it for this week, and thanks for your time. I'll be back next week. Bye!